welcome to the webinar. It's really great that you can join us just as people continue to attend. Just to let you know that you are in listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. It'd be really great if we can answer anything as we're going through the webinar. We anticipate it lasting about an hour. So this is a really exciting topic we've got today. So here we go. Right, okay, I'm going to start off as the last few people attend, I'm just going to start off the PowerPoint, and we're going to go through some really exciting stuff. So today, as part of my Talks 2 series, we are talking to Clement-Large. He is an NLP expert. It's really great to have him along as well. So a little bit about my series and what I'm doing. So here we go. There's me again. So I deal a lot with empowering intrapreneurs and entrepreneurs. Now, intrapreneurs are entrepreneurs within an organization, and it's all about affecting positive change within lives, and which then have that impact upon their businesses. So you've got to get not only the business skills right, but also that business, the thinking behind it, the confidence, the self-belief as well, to believe that you can put the business stuff into place. So it really doesn't matter whether you are somebody working for an organization and you're wanting promotion, or you're wanting to grow your knowledge base or your skills. That's great. But also if you're an entrepreneur, if you're wanting to set up your own organization, your own business, you might have your very own special skills that you're bringing to the table, but maybe the business skills and the business side isn't your bag. So that's a great way, working with me as a coach, to be able to help you to learn those skills and to be much more effective in what you're doing. And after all, there's been a lot of research around training to say that training is great, but actually you lose that information really, really quickly after a training session. And it's only really once you implement that training and that knowledge that you get that return on investment that you're looking for. So as I said, I'm doing a part of the Learn from an Expert. So I'm having different people in. We've had leadership coaches. We've had program and transformational change, looking at projects. We're looking at management accounting coming up for small businesses. And today we're looking at NLP and communicating effectively, and how we can use NLP to do that. So we'll start off by saying that when you think about it, are you communicating effectively at the moment? Is everything that you're saying to others, is it being acted on in the right way? You're getting your message across effectively? Are you feeling that everything's happening, or is it a bit of a struggle? Do you feel like you're shouting and having to get that message across? Because really all we want is some collaborative working. We want us to be able to work effectively and understand what each other is saying and what each other are wanting. And this goes just as much in our private lives as in our professional lives. And you can be left sometimes in work feeling, no matter what you say, that nobody's listening, no one's hearing, and no one's saying anything about what you're doing. And that's tricky when you're a leader and you're managing a team, because you can just end up feeling like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and that's not really a good place to be. But communication should feel easy. It should feel, you should feel relaxed about it, knowing how to communicate. So this is what today is all about. Because if you don't get those skills right, you can just feel like you're on a bit of a roller coaster ride. It can feel a bit sort of up and scary, and you can feel sort of out of your comfort zone, and that's not what we want. So we're here with Chris, and he's a real expert on communicating effectively and understanding language and body language and how we do things. So welcome, Chris. It's really, really good to have you as part of today's webinar.
Thank you, Debbie, and hello everybody else.
So Chris, this is a little bit of background about Chris. Now, he's worked for many, many years. He started off in the military, and he's led teams. Now he works with businesses and individuals to be able to get those skills on communication and understanding both yourself and the way other people work is really important. Now, he works in the public and the private sector, and he does a lot of work with the Chamber of Commerce. He really is the Mr. Networking man of the NLP. Well, he's really, really good at networking and communicating with other people. So, and he's also done a lot of work with the Growth Accelerator as well, which has sort of come to an end. But that was a really, really good plan, and it was a great way of helping businesses to be able to grow and to be able to get some of those really, really key skills, of which communicating is one of them. So, Chris, really, really nice to have you as part of the webinar. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, so a bit of time in the military, as you say, and working across a wide range of things, dealing in leadership and soft skills, of which communication is one. And one of the things that I think you said quite early on is I use NLP as the foundation to those behavioral skills. So, the things that I was looking at sort of cracking into today was I was going to introduce people to a couple of models that are in the NLP world. And I'll underline the word models. Models are very simply pictorial or auditory representations and perceptions of something else. So I'm not going to be talking about the neuroscience of the brain and stuff like that, but I'm going to produce a model which may suggest how things are taken on board by the people we're trying to communicate with. But before that, looking at a model about what does success look like? Success in communication primarily, because that's the point of this particular one, but this model can be generalized out across the whole of our life. So, what are those pillars of success that we're going to be looking at? So that's where I'm going with this. So
is this something that you can use? Is this something that you can use as an internal dialogue as well as outward communication of these skills?
Certainly can. Let's be clear that this is around where you are considering and planning your communication. So it's in those arenas where you're either speaking to or writing communication. And the arenas, again, where you're talking to yourself and using it for internal dialogue is perhaps when you're going into meditation state, or you're sort of thinking about having a discussion with yourself around where your business is going. That these pillars of success work as well with that, as they do naturally when you're talking externally or writing externally. This is not around those casual conversations where you meet someone in the street and you're having that chit chat. Although, if you're quick enough, you can possibly use the pillars. This is more around where you're going to networking meetings, where you're presenting at conferences, where you may be standing up and doing your 1-minute pitch, writing an email, writing a bid or proposal, or even writing a paper for something academic. Anything that's in that form where you're thinking about what it is that you're going to try and communicate.
So these are the things that we're going to be having a look at today, Chris. These are the key things that we're going to take us through?
Yep. So the first thing, as it says there, is we're going to look at these 4 pillars of success and the foundation upon which that success is built. And we're going to spend a fair bit of time looking at those and really understanding those 4 pillars. And then we're going to have a look at, I've actually called it no such thing as reality, only observer-created reality.
Ooh, what does that mean, Chris?
Well, I'm going to leave that one until I actually come to the model and we look at it, and I'll explain more about that. Let's say I've cast the first hook with a little bit of bait on for you and those people who are listening as well, to stay around and just see what this one's all about.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next slide then, shall we? So we've got the first bit of the pillar there, or the roof then.
Well, the roof, most of us need a good roof above us to keep us going. And again, the 4 pillars of success is around building great lines of communication. So again, the roof is around personal success, growth and development. So, how do we support our chances of really being successful and fabulous and excellent in our personal lives, achieving growth and development across that? And, it was, next slide, if you actually then think about it, Stephen Covey, in his 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, was very, very clear in habit 2 about what this first pillar is. And he said, we begin with the end in mind. My military days, I remember there were a number of projects where the end in mind was never considered, and people started and they wasted lots and lots of money because they didn't know where they were going.
Right.
So the first pillar as you just put up there, is very much around being outcome orientated.
Mm.
So
and I think that's a problem for a lot of people. They don't really know where they're going. They feel like they're drifting along in life, don't they?
Yeah. You know, and if you're drifting and you've got nothing to aim at, you know, if you don't know where your north is, then the chances are you're not going to get there.
How on earth do you find your north, though?
Sorry?
How on earth do you find your north?
Well, it's what are you passionate about? What do you want? You know, it's defining the goals, your outcomes. I use the word outcome because that's one that I align with. But let's use the word goal, target, performance indicator, whatever it happens to be, is the words that best define what is that point at which you wish to arrive. So in my days of Growth Accelerator, one of the things that we used to do with businesses is we used to say to them, so if in 3 years' time you are highly successful, what does that look like? And we would get them to go to 3 years' time and define those elements which they would measure both quantitatively and qualitatively, which would tell them that they're successful. So again, in your personal lives, you know, what is it that you want out of life? In your health and fitness, what is it you want out of your health and fitness? In your business, what is it you want out of your business? And it's about what you want, not what the business gives you. It's what you want. So being orientated and absolutely focused on the north for that particular aspect of your life. And they may not be all the same. I hope they're not. They could well be all different.
Are there any problems then with having goals? You know,
there can be problems in the sense that if you, and again, we'll come on to these later, there can be the problem with goals, because if you don't do anything about those goals, groovy, they mean nothing. It says there, you know, Buddha said, a dream remains as nothing more than an aspiration until someone puts action behind it.
That's really profound, isn't it? Because you're right. You know, if you could be thinking about what you want forever and a day, but unless you do something about it, you're never going to get it.
Absolutely. You know, I would invite you know, the people now just to spend a couple of minutes to write down on a piece of paper one of the goals they've got in their lives. And actually having written that goal, and by the way, write that goal as a positive statement. Not what you do not want, it's what you want.
And I think a lot of research has shown that actually it's much more powerful to write your goal down than keeping your goal in your head. But then even more powerful, again, if you share that goal with somebody else, and you'll sort of feel like you're held accountable for it then as well.
Well, you make a commitment. You know, one of the great things about sharing things with other people is, to an extent, you do make an unconscious commitment to them. By saying that's what you're going to do, you unconsciously commit to them that you are responsible to them for actually completing it, even if they're not involved with it. So, you know, I occasionally share goals that I've got with the business with my wife. There is an unconscious commitment to her about achieving that goal in the business, although she has nothing to do with the business, bar the fact she's my supporter, naturally. And yet I'm committed to completing that goal because she's part and parcel of who I've shared it with. But the positive thing is the most important thing. You know, I think that during your webinar on goal setting, I think you talked about SMART goals.
I certainly talked about sort of, yes. We talked about them being relevant and why and who would help you, and getting that creative side as well as the logical side to them. But actually doing something about it and having a timeline almost towards working towards.
Absolutely. Yeah, and yet one of the things that people forget to do is actually make the goal positive. And it's interesting, you know, I wonder how many of the listeners, and you as well, you know, how many of you have lost something? How many of you lost your credit card or your business cards? How many of you have lost your telephone? Or you've lost money, or you may have lost a friend, or you know, in a worst case, permanently lost a friend or a relative or a pet or something like that. the emotions that are related with losing something are normally quite painful. I would call them unresourceful. They could be quite negative. And yet it's interesting, one of the businesses around the world who expect us, despite the fact that we have this habitual relationship between loss and unresourceful feelings, there is one business which continually tells us that we should be positive about losing something. And it's the weight loss business. People keep saying, I want to lose weight, I want to lose weight. And yet most human brains are habitualized and connected to associating not particularly good feelings with loss. And yet the weight loss industry is expecting us to cheer weight loss. So anyone that comes to me with something that they want to lose or something they want to stop doing, which is another negative word, I invite them to think about what is it that they want when they've lost the weight. So someone may turn around and say, I want to be, I don't know, 3 inches smaller in my waist, or I want to get into a dress that's 2 sizes smaller than it was, it's sitting in my wardrobe. And I invite them then to treat that as their goal, not the weight loss. And it's interesting that then becomes positive, and you can see the transformation inside them, because emotionally now they are positively connected to that goal, not negatively connected to it.
So once we have the goal, then where do we go from there then? What happens? What's the next step?
The next step is create an action plan. Now, if that goal is a massive, big goal, you may need to break it down into smaller ones. And again, you mentioned having a timeline. Create the timeline. But most importantly, and the question again, if your listeners have literally written down that goal on the piece of paper, is look at it and ask themselves, what is the smallest action and the very smallest action they can take tomorrow to start the movement towards that goal? Because so many of us try to take whopping great big steps or whopping great big actions as the starting point of that goal, and actually lose impetus very quickly, because of course they wear themselves out, rather than thinking about, if I take a small step tomorrow, I can take the next smallest step, the next smallest step. And the more and more small steps we take, the greater is the inertia that actually pushes us along to completing that goal. And
I love that quote you've got.
Sorry?
I love that quote you've got on there, the Lao Tzu one.
Yep.
So a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and that's exactly what you've been saying, isn't it? Which is, great. It's about thinking about the baby steps and everything we do then, really. And
again, I'll bring that back to another area that I thoroughly enjoy doing. I'm also a running coach. I do endurance running. I personally do endurance running. I'm also a running coach. And one of the things that's interesting with my athletes is that people say the hardest part of going for a run is putting the shoes on. It has nothing to do with going out the door and taking the first step of the run. It's physically putting the shoes on. Once the shoes are on, that small step, most people then in general will go out and run.
Gosh, so, that's
again, in their business world or in their personal lives, what do they need to do to put their shoes on, to start that journey? And I know it's the J word, but start that journey towards the achievement of this outcome, this goal, which they've got in their mind, which they are passionate about and they would love to get their hands on. As someone says, it's all very well saying, I'd love to win the lottery and win £1 million, but the first thing you've got to do is buy a lottery ticket.
Well, that's true. Yes, I'm never in it because I never buy one.
Well, you might dream of wanting to win £1 million on the lottery, but because you haven't got one, you ain't going to.
No. So what happens after that then? So we've got our goals and then we're thinking about taking the first steps. Where do we go from here then?
Yeah, no, remember we're talking about communication with this. So, think about the point of your communication. What are you going to do? In most people's cases, that's easy. Either I've got to go to a networking meeting or I've got to volunteer to stand up and say something. So there's the action, or I've got to sit down in front of my computer and write it. The next thing is around using all of your senses and this really is true in the communication world, to understand the impact that your communication is having upon your audience. I go to many networking meetings, as you were kind enough to mention, and I've seen so many people so nervous about themselves that they fail to recognize the impact of what they're saying is having upon the person they're talking to. And they don't recognize that they've said something wrong, they're bored, you know, that they're not having any impact. So it's opening your peripheral vision, your peripheral auditory vision.
Ooh, what does that mean?
Well, literally, you know, the way we open peripheral vision, instead of being tunnel visioned and looking down at one small thing, is really opening up your eyes and your ears and your feelings internally and externally to what's happening around you, and really paying attention to the impact that your communication is having.
So is that a bit more about understanding body language and things as well then?
Well, it's that as well. It's also understanding you. So if something happens outside you and it creates a feeling of discomfort inside you, you should be asking yourself, why am I feeling uncomfortable about this? What is happening outside me that is creating this feeling of discomfort inside me, and what do I do to change it?
So it's a bit about listening to yourself then, being
absolutely.
Yourself. Yeah.
You know, that's why I say internal, that's about you. External, that's about what's happening around you, both the person and everything else that's happening around it as well. Is really understanding, you know, what is happening all over the place. It's just being aware. And certainly, you know, the thing I love doing when I'm doing public speaking or I'm doing my training is I've got to open peripheral vision to take in all of my audience, to recognize the impact that the words I'm using, and certainly in a training event, are having upon my audience. And that's not just using my eyes, but it's using my ears, using my feelings, and using everything else to really understand how my audience are taking on my communication. And again, when you're writing something, and you earlier on said, you know, is this also where you do it with yourself? So important to, having written something, is become the other person. So take yourself outside your own body and become the other person, and now read it from their world, and actually read through what you've written from their map of the world and say, how am I, as that other person, going to react when I receive this email? Or how am I going to react when I receive this report or this proposal or whatever it happens to be?
Gosh, because that's something that most people wouldn't do or even think about doing, would they?
Yeah. You know, the problem with this, the fabulous stuff about social media and everything else, is it's instantaneous. The thing is, it's so instantaneous, we don't necessarily think about what we've written. And haven't we heard so many stories about people who put things up on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever without checking what it really means? Suddenly, in the perception of everyone else, they've written something that is totally misaligned with the message that that person was originally trying to transmit. So am I making sense with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I've seen that happen so many times in a work situation as well, where, you know, just the language they've used is not congruent with what they really meant, and therefore could be taken the wrong way, or you could end up upsetting somebody when really it was just the way you'd phrased something, or hadn't read it properly or thought it through. But how do you sort of build up those skills then? Because I mean, you know, that sounds really sensible and really, well, I don't know whether it sounds easy, but how do you sort of build up those skills to sort of be more aware of what's going on?
In terms of the senses, is just open your senses. Practice that. You know, meditation and yoga are really great at allowing you to go quiet inside and really opening all of your senses. Yes, it takes time, and yet there are many practices. And again, if you check the web, there are many practices around learning just how to open up. And in terms of the external bit is don't just focus on you trying to get your message across. Focus on what the impact is of your message.
So it's all about thinking about what you're doing and then making a change to what you're doing. Is that right, really,
Yeah.
then?
And then that moves us on, of course, very neatly. There we are. You know, Albert Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result.
See, I love this quote because it just says so much about, you know, that the importance of change, but changing within us and allowing change without us as well. And because we can't always have things the same.
No. And people are not the same.
Well, that's very true, actually. Yes. No, definitely. Yes.
You know, there are those people who will take visual information on very quickly. There are those people who will take auditory or sound information on very quickly. There are people who will take feeling information on very quickly. And as a communicator, if you're communicating with them in the wrong language type, so you're communicating in visual language and they are a high feeling person, you may not be getting A, the right message, or B, even your message through to them because you're not speaking their language.
So that's why sometimes people in senior management positions may find difficulty in getting what they want their team to do potentially then.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
And again, you know, that's where the fourth pillar comes in, is around the behavioral flexibility. You know, it really is about, if you recognize that what you're saying isn't getting your message across, then say it differently. Think of a different way of putting it across instead of just doing one. And, you know, I quote the stories because I'm old enough to remember these days when Englishmen used to go across to France, and if they didn't get their message across in English, they would raise their voice. That's the only change they'd make. Wouldn't change the message. They just shout it louder, and they may make it a bit slower.
I love that thought. That's quite funny.
And yet, you know, if they had just changed the way changed the way they're trying to get the message across, done it differently, it may even been the language may have been wrong, you know, or using sort of hand language as well as verbal language to get the message across. Whatever it happens to be is, you know, if you're not making an impact with your message, then do something differently.
So what would you suggest for business then? I mean, how could they be more flexible? How could they look at changing how they're communicating?
Well, the thing is, look at what your marketing's doing. You know, marketers will love me for saying this, but, you know, if your marketing's not working and therefore you're not getting the returns you're expecting from your marketing, ask yourself, are you actually saying the right words, using the right images to get the message across, you know, or do you need to change it? In terms of literally, if businessmen are saying things to their workforce and it doesn't seem to be getting through, find a different way to actually get that message across. So instead of getting, you know, when you stand up and you're trying to do, I don't know, a returns on management accounts, you're going to do a management account, but, you know, and you sit there doing the Excel spreadsheet presentation on the management figures, and it doesn't seem to be going through, ask yourself how you could do that differently, that it would get through. You know, is there something different that can be brought into the game that actually will allow your message to get across far better? So you're not going to get across all the message necessarily fabulously. You are going to get some of it across.
So instead of maybe, I mean, figures of that's kind of my background really. Having been an accountant for many years, as there are a lot of people that struggle with things like figures, and I used to put it more into charts or into diagrams or write it rather than present them with a table. So is it that type of thing with just changing?
Yes, absolutely. Change the medium in which you are trying to get your information across. So, you know, your figures, you know, you're not going to be able to change the actual figures themselves. What you want to do is change the way in which they are received inside the, you know, through the other person's communication medium. So as you beautifully said. You know, it may not be a list of figures. That may suit some people, but for others, you may have to draw it up on flip charts. You may have to put it together as different things. You may bring oranges and apples in to give a demonstration. You know, there's all sorts of ways of telling the metaphor which is associated with what the message you're trying to get across.
See, I like that thing about the physical thing, because actually there was a great thing on a TED talk where Bill Gates wanted to talk about malaria, and he had a PowerPoint as well, but he actually went in with a jar of mosquitoes. And I love that thing because it was so visual and so shocking to the audience. You know, why should people that are poor just experience this problem with malaria and mosquitoes? That actually, I think, and he released these mosquitoes into the atmosphere. And that made it so memorable in terms of being different, that it stood out from other things and wasn't dull. So I suppose about him trying to be flexible and getting his message across.
Absolutely. And again, you know, if you're doing a presentation, let's say, for instance, you're preparing and presenting a proposal that you've got for a piece of business. Think about how you could do it in a number of different ways, you know, rather than just standing behind a lectern delivering the words that maybe wanted to be heard. How else could you get your message across that you meet both those people who enjoy pictures, those people who enjoy sounds, those people who enjoy feelings? How do you combine all of those three avenues of communication into your message that it actually strikes home and has a really fabulous impact with everyone that you are talking to, rather than just a few?
So I suppose this comes back to really, really understanding your audience then. Absolutely.
Totally about understanding your audience and getting to know them. But again, we go back to the third pillar. Even if you don't know them personally, and you know, one of the things I say about networking is that networking is about meeting new people and introducing yourself to them, really, really being aware of where the impact of your message is going with that new person, by using all of those senses to be aware of how impactful you are being. Because you will see those people who suddenly get in really great rapport with you, you can guess you're probably getting your message across. If they're still looking incongruent, you know, and they may be saying yes, but at the same time shaking their heads in the no direction, you may not be getting your message across as fully as you want to. You know, and it's picking up all of those sorts of little tips and hints that people are giving away.
So it comes really down to a lot of psychology then, really, doesn't it? In terms of understanding how people behave and how they think. And at
the end of the day, we're human beings. And you know, the first thing we got to understand is, how are we human beings? How do we behave?
So how do we go from here then? So we've got our goals and moving towards them and being aware, and then trying to be flexible in our delivery.
Well, as you see there, we've now got the house with its 4 pillars and its roof. Well, no house stands successfully without some really strong foundations. And in terms of human behavior, the really, really strongest foundation that people can have in communication and everything else is ensuring they are in both a psychological and a physiological state of excellence. And what I mean by that is, because the body and the mind are related and interconnected, if you are really positive in your mind, your body will give out those positive, passionate things. If you are positive in the way that you approach people physically, your mind will also be in the positive state. And I'm guessing that you've been to networking meetings where people have come up to you and they're slumped and everything else, and the first thing they say is they're not a morning person and they need their first cup. And you can hear it from my voice, you know, and you're getting this sort of thing, and they're not very passionate. Do you really feel like buying into and buying from them when they're trying to tell you what their business is all about and how they can benefit with you, when they've got no passion in themselves about it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've even seen that interviewing people for jobs as well.
Yeah.
people have been like that. They've just like, that's the last place on earth they wanted to be just at that moment. And then you wonder what they're doing there.
Yeah, quite, and you go into networking meetings, and certainly the morning ones, and I attend a fair number of those, number of people who think that because it is morning, they aren't in the right place, and they're not in the right state of mind. They will turn around and say, I'm not a morning person. And I keep reminding them, at the end of the day, they choose about what they wish to be. It's not the morning's fault that they're not doing a great job. They are choosing the state of mind, and they just happen to be, their state of mind in the morning, they believe, is because they're not a morning person. They are whatever they wish to be. They can be fabulous 24 hours a day, all the time that they wish to be. They choose.
So how should people get themselves in the right frame of mind then for doing something?
Ooh, fabulous question there, Debbie. All sorts of ways of doing it. Go back to thinking about, let's say, your last holiday. If you want to imagine what it was like to be energized and free and relaxed before you start doing, let's say, a presentation or a networking meeting or something, and go back to the last time and be in that holiday and recognize those feelings of being relaxed, being energized, enjoying the sun playing on your body. Recognize those feelings inside you, anchor those feelings, and while you've still got those feelings, take yourself into the networking meeting or stand up on the stage and do things. And for other people that, who are really, really reactive to music, and I think you said you were, is think of those tunes which really give you a high. One of the things that I love listening to just before I go to a networking meeting, if I'm not quite in the right place, is the theme tune to Gladiator, the Russell Crowe film.
Yeah, very powerful.
That theme tune, that really great beating music that builds up and builds up and builds up. I've got that on a playlist that I can access just like that. And just using that external trigger creates a great feeling inside me. And nowadays, I don't even need the external because I've got it in my head and I've just played it off again. I get into that really great state.
So almost when you're talking about imagining what it was like on your last holiday or such forth, we're almost sort of visualizing creatively. I suppose you could do the same with writing it as well, couldn't you?
Yeah.
It's about finding whatever works for you to be able to trigger those feelings and those emotions. And
yep. And bear in mind, our internal state is not defined by our external environment. We can have the state whenever we want it. The environment just happens to be something that is a trigger for it. So for instance, take confidence. One of, as well as I do, one of the biggest issues that people have around standing up and doing a presentation is they say they're not confident. And yet, when I invite them to think about, a time when they are confident, and it's surprising how many of them actually come up with, well, I'm confident when I'm driving. I get them to imagine they're sat in the car with the steering wheel in front of them, the dashboard and everything else, and they describe it to me, and I get them driving along and really tapping into that state of confidence, and then say, right, hold on to that state of confidence right now and imagine yourself stepping up on the stage. And because they can do that, they suddenly realize that they are confident wherever they choose to be. What we just got to do is habitualize it, because we put these limiting beliefs in place, and limiting beliefs are nothing more than habits which we're exceptionally good at doing. They're just not particularly resourceful. So let's change the habit. So, if you're going to do a presentation or you're going to do your 1-minute pitch or whatever it is, and you want to feel confidence, create the confidence of driving your car, imagine yourself in the car, and now take yourself into the context or into the environment of doing that presentation.
I suppose that also comes in as well, because you said our internal state is not determined by our external environment. So, with the whole presentation thing, but I suppose that also applies then if people are saying things, or maybe, if somebody's saying, oh, you can't do that, you're not good enough to do that, or that equally applies, because if you're quite secure in your inside and how you feel, none of that will affect you, will it?
Correct. Absolutely. There's nothing more to say. You've summed that up beautifully.
Yeah, so it's about having that, like you say, that really good foundation about feeling, maybe knowing who you are, and I don't know, getting that confidence, isn't it, to sort of get you in the right place.
Beautifully, you've just brought another metaphor to mind. Think about when you're sat in, and I'm guessing both you and your listeners have flown at least once. Think about, when the cabin staff give you the safety brief and they talk about the air supply. First thing they say is, make sure you put the air mask on you before you help other people.
Oh.
So in terms of leadership, in terms of communication, in terms of anything, you need to understand who and what you are before you bring that to bear upon other people. Because once you know who you are, you can then actually do the behavioral flexibility bit, because you'll know what behaviors need to change around you to really be impactful with other people. And that goes back to the state management, really understanding how you create great states inside yourself. Knowing that is really fabulous.
So really then, if we're moving, everything that we hear and we talked about is just an opinion then, isn't it?
Yep.
Not a fact.
Yeah. Which brings us beautifully to my, as I said in the first slide when you introduced me, there's no such thing as reality. It's only observer created. It's our opinion of what's happening.
I mean, that's just a powerful quote. I mean, that's just so true today, even though it was written all those years ago.
Yep, good old Marcus.
Wow. And
in fact, that particular quote underpins this next model. So now we understand the line up to success. Let's understand how people now take on the information. Now, Tad James is a very senior NLP expert. He was the guy that brought about and introduced timelining. They've been around, but he'd put the sort of the more formalized wording around timelining and timelines, and doing therapy and coaching around timeline. But what he did is that he looked at how people communicated, and more importantly, how people took in information. And, the first part of the whole of the information flow is what's happening outside us. Is that external event? Here's the reality. And that reality comes into our senses through our skin, through our eyes, through our ears, etc., through our taste and through our smell. And that is what we take in. And what happens is it then passes, this information, this massive data we take through our senses, then pass through a set of filters, which are driven by our values. And I'm guessing everybody listening to this actually run their life based upon a set of ethics or a set of values, whatever the word is that you like to use. And whatever those values are, some of them are very deep core ones, things like integrity and honesty. Some of them are more surface ones because they've been learned while we've been in business or as we've grown up. There is also a difference in what a value means to each person. So the value of honesty for each of us on this webinar, actually our belief of what honesty really means may actually differ. Well, that difference will also define how we filter that external information and our attitude to that external information.
So where do all those filters, those values, and where do they come from?
Well, the values, for instance, come from literally we start learning our values at a very, very, very young age. As children, we start forming our values through our modeling and interaction with our parents. There may also be some nurture side of it, some nature side of it. So we may actually be born with some of them. There is a suggestion that actually we are a blank canvas in our brain, but very quickly through our interactions with our parents, with our interactions with our siblings, with our interactions with our family, those values begin to get set by whatever is the actions and whatever they see and whatever they do. You know, you think about it, child between the age of 0 and 7 actually doesn't form their own opinions. What they do is those opinions are formed by their interactions with other people. They are pure sponges. They suck in everything that's around them. I'm wondering again, we had a beautiful example of it. Yesterday, a friend of ours was relating about, she's the grandmother to a 3-year-old, and her 3-year-old turned around and said something to this friend of ours, which was very, very senior and very adult-like, and just didn't make sense. And then she thought about what was said, and she recognized that what it was actually the child was repeating what the mother had said to her.
That's interesting, isn't it? So, I mean, even those things carry right through into adulthood as well, can't they?
Totally. And then, of course, we build those values up by our interaction then with our teachers, you know, from whatever age it is, 5 onwards. Teachers and the education system become far bigger in our world. And then, of course, you know, at the teenage years, parents and the education system become less important. Friends and peers become really, really important. So they set our values then. And then from sort of, for those who start work at 16, or for those who sort of go into the work environment at 21, whatever it is, we start building up our business values as well. So that's where those are all set. Also, experiences and memories. You know, we all have experiences and memories, and therefore we filter information based on those, and the language in which we've already talked about those streams of language. Again, if we say things in the wrong way, then they will go through that language filter and get disturbed. And a thing called the behavioral preferences. Some of you may have heard of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Well, those are the 4 core behavioral preferences. There are lots more around, and yet each of us has a different behavioral preference. And therefore, because of those, we therefore filter that information. So the reality of the external event is already being filtered, and what then happens is that through those filters, we actually do 3 functions. And those 3 functions is we generalize information, we distort the information, or we delete the information. In generalization, what I mean by that is that we put stuff in that is commonly together, and we learn information. So for instance, when you first learned to open a door, what you did is you began to recognize what a door was and how to open it. And so every time you then came up to a door, you unconsciously knew how to operate a door. Once in a while we get caught out, you know, where we see the hand plate and we expect to push the door. We miss the fact there's a handle, so we push the hand plate and find it actually is a pull one. And that's part and parcel of the learning. But in general, we would know how to operate that door. Distortion is great around creativity. We distort the information and we make new things out of it, or our own perception of it, or we delete it. And I'm guessing there are times when, you know, we've been concentrating on something else and we haven't heard what our partner says, or we haven't remembered the important dates in their lives, you know, and we've deleted that sort of information. All of a sudden, we've now created our own reality, and we store that reality as either pictures, sounds, feelings, smells, tastes. And occasionally, for some of us, we have that tape recorder, that inner voice, which also brings back some of our memories. So there's a reality, the external event, and now here's our reality. That reality and that information, if we then move on, when we come to the output side, so, you know, the internal rep system is also known as data storage, call it what you will. We are a big computer, massive computer. The information now goes into this box called state. We have the body going in, we have the mind information going in, creates the state. Our state then defines our behavior. Our behavior impacting upon the other person will give you a result. It may not be the result you're expecting, because don't forget that if you're in communication, this model is also happening on the other side with the other person. So, you know, their external event is what you are saying or communicating to them. But that's what I meant by there is no such thing as reality, just observer-created reality. And I'm guessing, Debbie, if you had the opportunity to meet the other people who are listening to this and said to them, what are the things that struck you about today's webinar, you would get X number of different things that would strike people, because their perception of what they actually heard or saw or whatever will differ because of those filters, despite the fact that you and I are doing exactly the same thing for all of them.
We'll both take away different things from it, which
Absolutely.
is interesting. And that always happens in training, and which is why coaching is so good, because you can actually help them to put it into their workplace and get that, make sure that understanding, rather than them having spent a day or half a day on a training session and actually not being really sure or clear on what that means and how that can make them work, because maybe they filtered it or understood it in a slightly different way than the trainer was trying to get across.
Correct.
So
and that's why it's so important. We go back to the pillars of really opening up your senses when you're doing a training event, and really being aware of the impact of your words or your flip chart or your PowerPoint upon your audience.
So it's really about understanding how the other person will understand your information, and being, you know, because, you know, we have a hard enough time understanding ourselves, don't we, and knowing who we really are, let alone where somebody else is. So I mean, how you know, how do you really put that in reality then? Because I mean, we have all these things impacting upon us, but how on earth do we know what's you know, impacting upon them?
Well, again, it's using your senses. It's really opening yourself up to being aware. And again, if we're doing a presentation or something like that, you know, the one thing I would say is, first thing to do is really get to know your information. And certainly if you're doing a presentation on something you're passionate about, then really know your information. So that becomes unconscious. And then the conscious bit is you paying attention to your audience. I'm guessing that quite a large number of people who don't pay attention to their audience are actually more worried about what they're going to say, and they're worried more about themselves and what's coming out their mouth, rather than seeing its impact upon the people they're talking to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes as well, people are more afraid of what people will say about them, when actually most of the time in most people's heads, they're thinking about them and themselves rather than other people. So it's, you know, it's about not worrying about what other people think, but just being clear where you are and having those good foundations, and that you were saying earlier with the pillars, and actually being clear on who you are, and, you know, not taking on board and not letting external events sort of shudder you as a person, you know, create those ripples. You have that sort of sturdy wall around you to protect knowing who you are.
Absolutely. I love that metaphor of the shuddering you, and you are actually firm and totally based on your foundations. Really like that metaphor.
Thank you. So do you know what, I think it's really important now that we've just had so much information, and it, you know, it really makes you think, doesn't it, how we not only as a person think about ourselves and how we're operating, but how often we're influenced by other people and circumstances, and what we think other people think of us, and you know, how maybe we can come across really well. So, you know, has this changed your thinking? Has it made you think differently about not only who you are as a person, but how you might understand why some people don't understand your message, or you know, you find it difficult to get across, and you know instinctively that maybe that your message isn't getting across by their body language, they're not looking at you, they're not seeming very interested. But it's interesting to know that there are ways to be able to do it, and that to understand not only how people, their preferences and how they like to receive information, but maybe what's happened in their past. And sometimes really understanding your audience as much as you can will help you to be more flexible and alter the way that you deliver your message, and that will hopefully make you a better communicator. So at this point, it'd be really good to have a think about what you want to do now. What's your next step towards achieving your goals? So if you're thinking about doing a presentation, what do you need to do differently, or what do you need to think about differently in your life to actually help you to be able to present in a better way, in a more effective way? Is it understanding your audience? Is it having that confidence within you and not worrying about what other people will think or not what other people will say, but actually concentrating on just getting your message across and being really clear and having that solid foundation of who you are and what your message is and really understanding that? So take a moment now to really think what your next step is and how you want to move towards your goals, because everything that's been said today is really, really key and will help change your life so much. So just as a great thank you for being part of the webinar, we've got a couple of special offers. So from me, we've been talking about managing staff, we've been talking about managing ourselves and communicating ourselves. Now, apart from us as being best assets, so we are the best asset for any business, any organization. People always are. But then one of the next best assets is managing those relationships that we have with people. And your list is one of your most important assets, because that's the way you as an individual, you're communicating individual to individual. So from you as a business out to your prospects or out to your customers. And it's about remembering who you're communicating to, that you're not communicating just to a mass of people, that you're communicating to one person. And it's about understanding who that person is. Who is that person? What are they wanting? What is their passions? What are their fears? What are their aspirations? And it's about learning to communicate in a way that ensures that you get a good rapport between you and the communication at the end of your email. So I've got a free making your list your best asset, and it all talks about understanding your avatar, how to best communicate so that you build up that good rapport, that you keep your list warm and open and receptive to maybe you've got special offers or maybe different bits of your business that you want. But what's really key is about sharing value with people and actually just giving value but not charging for it. It's about sharing some of your knowledge and passing that on to other people. So at the end of the webinar, you'll go straight to the link for that. So please sign up. That would be great. It's a really good ebook and certainly worth having. And Chris, you've got a fantastic offer as well.
Yep, I'm offering 10% off any of the NLP courses that I run. I run a one-day intro to NLP, which is also around communicating even more effectively, as well as the 15-day NLP practitioner course, which is based around the coaching model, etc. So if anyone wants to come on that, just mention that they saw it on the Why Follow the Herd webinar, and they'll get 10% off those courses. Check the website out. The details are there on the slide about what's in those various courses.
Fabulous. That's a really generous offer, Chris. And I've been on the introduction with you, and it's a really great day. It's having that participation with other people, and it's a really, really interesting subject. So definitely sign up for that. And Chris, tell us the last little bit, how people can contact and communicate with you.
Either through my website, or as you can see, I do use a bit of Twitter, Facebook and LinkedIn for the business. But most importantly also is through email as well, which I am regular, and I think my email address is on there. If not, then go through the website. You'll be able to contact me that way. To talk about anything along the NLP or the coaching or the human behavior side, anything like that at all, more than happy to come and chat, either over the telephone or, hey, why not over a hot cup of coffee? They are normally pretty good, those.
That sounds like a really nice idea, actually. Yeah, brilliant. So definitely get in contact with Chris. There's so much more to learn about all this. So give him a shout, contact him on Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn, or go have a look at his website, or drop him an email, as he said. He's very good for coffee or meeting down the pub, as we tend to do, Chris. Isn't that right?
Let's not mention that.
All right, then, fair enough. So lastly, about me, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been really, really nice having you as part of the webinar. would really like to have some more contact with you. So, let me know what you're interested in and future webinars. I've got some other ones coming up, some I do on my own, and I have a series of collaborative ones as well. So if there's anything you're interested in that you'd like to know a bit more about, then, drop me a line and let me know, and we'll put something together. And you can contact me on Facebook, which is Why Follow the Herd, or Twitter is @WhyFollowHerd. And of course, you can contact me on my website, which is whyfollowtheherd.com. And, or send me an email, which is whyfollowtheherd@gmail.com. And it would be really, really great to, find out some more about you, get in my weekly Heard It's Monday newsletters. I have some great content on there. You'll hear about all my free webinars on that. Have a nice, positive, inspiring quote. So, if you want to learn some skills, both personal and business related skills, then get in touch with me. And don't forget the offer. You'll go directed to my website in a moment. My offer's on the homepage, so sign up there and you'll get my free ebook, and we'll be in contact soon. So anyway, it's been really, really nice having you part of the webinar, and I hope to see you soon. So take care and have a good day.